A Memoir of Fear and Authority. I was a child attending a Catholic church when the assault happened. I had been taught to obey authority and respect the priest. But he had other ideas. A Memoir of Fear and Authority. The priest suddenly grabbed me and dragged me into an empty room. I felt helpless. I didn't know what to do or how to respond. A Memoir of Fear and Authority. He then forced me into a dark alley, where he held me tightly against a wall. I was filled with terror and could not escape. A Memoir of Fear and Authority. I struggled to free myself, but it was no use. He had me pinned against the wall. I begged and pleaded for help, but my cries fell on deaf ears. A Memoir of Fear and Authority. Just when I thought all was lost, a gust of wind suddenly blew up the alley. I was able to break free and run away. I never wanted to come back. A Memoir of Fear and Authority. That experience changed me forever. It shaped my lifelong fear of authority figures and made me distrustful of anyone in a position of power. A Memoir of Fear and Authority. A Memoir of Fear and Authority. I was now a teenager attending school. I was determined to make something of myself, but I was still filled with fear and mistrust. I was constantly on guard, expecting the worst from anyone in a position of authority. A Memoir of Fear and Authority. One day, I was in a classroom when the teacher asked me a question. I froze. I was too scared to answer. I was sure that if I said the wrong thing, I would be punished. A Memoir of Fear and Authority. The teacher noticed my fear and asked me what was wrong. I was too scared to tell her the truth, so I lied and said I didn't know the answer. She didn't believe me and told me to stay after class. A Memoir of Fear and Authority. I was terrified. I was sure I was going to be punished. But instead, the teacher asked me why I was so scared. I finally opened up and told her about the assault. A Memoir of Fear and Authority. The teacher was understanding and kind. She told me that I didn't have to be afraid anymore. She said that I could trust her and that she would always be there for me. A Memoir of Fear and Authority. The teacher's words gave me the courage to face the challenge of school. I was determined to prove to myself and to the world that I could succeed. A Memoir of Fear and Authority. A Memoir of Fear and Authority. I decided to go to the library to study. I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. I was determined to succeed. A Memoir of Fear and Authority. I spent hours in the library, studying and reading. I was amazed at how much knowledge was contained in the books. I was learning so much and it felt good. A Memoir of Fear and Authority. Then, I had an idea. I realized that I could use the knowledge I was gaining to find a novel solution to my problem. I could use the books to help me overcome my fear of authority figures. A Memoir of Fear and Authority. So I started reading books about psychology and sociology. I read about how to deal with fear and how to trust authority figures. I was learning so much and it was helping me to understand my situation better. A Memoir of Fear and Authority. I was starting to feel more confident. I was beginning to understand that I could trust authority figures and that I didn't have to be afraid. I was finding a novel solution to my problem. A Memoir of Fear and Authority. But then, I realized something was missing. I had learned a lot, but I hadn't learned how to forgive. I hadn't learned how to let go of the anger and hurt I felt. A Memoir of Fear and Authority. A Memoir of Fear and Authority. I was in the library, trying to figure out how to forgive the priest who had assaulted me. I knew it was the only way I could truly move on and be free from my fear. A Memoir of Fear and Authority. Then, I had an idea. I decided to write a letter to the priest. I wrote about how I had been hurt and how I had been struggling to forgive him. I wrote about how I wanted to be free from my fear. A Memoir of Fear and Authority. I was surprised when I received a response from the priest. He apologized for his actions and said he was sorry for the pain he had caused me. He said he wanted to make amends and asked if we could meet. A Memoir of Fear and Authority. I was hesitant at first, but I decided to meet with him. We met in the church and talked for hours. He told me about his life and his struggles. I realized that he was a human being, just like me. A Memoir of Fear and Authority. At the end of our conversation, I finally found the courage to forgive him. I realized that he was not a monster, but a flawed human being. I was able to let go of my anger and hurt and move on with my life. A Memoir of Fear and Authority. A Memoir of Fear and Authority. With the help of the books I had read and the conversation I had with the priest, I was finally able to move on with my life. I was no longer afraid of authority figures and I was able to trust people again. A Memoir of Fear and Authority. I was now living a happy and fulfilling life. I was able to pursue my dreams and achieve my goals. I was no longer held back by my fear and mistrust.